For legendary producer Darryl F. Zanuck, The Longest Day was more than just a movie. It became an obsession for which he was prepared to risk everything.
That picture became his life. He was determined. And when I think back on it, I think back on all the things he used to say about if you want to do something, do it. Don't let anyone stop you.
In 1933, Darryl F. Zanuck left his job as head of production at Warner Brothers and founded the company which became known as 20th Century Fox.
We are all united in one common work, the work of making 20th Century Fox the outstanding company in the moving picture industry, and we will succeed.
There, he personally supervised the production of literally hundreds of films.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ranger. Thank you very much, Douglas. Thank you very much, Bob. I wish to thank you in behalf of the entire 20th Century Fox studio.
Everything from tuneful musicals to thought-provoking social dramas.
Zanuck, what are you two lovers?
Darryl Zanuck was very much hands-on. His interest was films, and he didn't give a damn about anything but doing a good job.
But in the early 1950s, television had crippled the once powerful motion picture industry, and the studio system that Zanuck had helped build was gasping its last breath.
A lot of the stars were now independent. A lot of the contract directors were no longer there. And Zanuck said, I'm no longer the production chief. I'm more of a negotiator with people and their agents.
He was a filmmaker, and he wanted to make pictures. He didn't want to be submerged in all the business aspects of it.
Zanuck was burned out and disillusioned. It also didn't help that his wife had recently found out about the affair he was having with a much younger actress and family friend named Bella Darby. Although Zanuck's sexual escapades were legendary in Hollywood, this particular fling sent shockwaves through Hollywood's otherwise liberal creative community.
It was like Hollywood went to war. Everybody took sides. And my mother was very, very popular. She was a sympathetic person. And I think that my father just couldn't stand it. He just wanted to get away from the whole thing.
Leaving his job as Fox's production chief, Darryl Zanuck, or DFZ as he was widely known, boarded a plane for Paris, vowing never to return to Hollywood.
Darryl Zanuck decided he had no more use for Hollywood. He said, you know, I'm tired of it. I'm burnt out. And he just took off for Paris, which was his favorite city.
My first independent production has just been completed. It is Island in the Sun, based on the best-selling novel by Alec Waugh.
Now living the life of an expatriate producer, Zanuck launched a string of ambitious but mostly disappointing films. He began to drink heavily and, at one point, even suffered a minor stroke.
People were saying, well, Darryl's through, he's washed up, he's finished. And he started to lose his confidence, which was unfortunate because if there's one thing that Zanuck always had, was confidence.
DFZ was desperate for a project that would revive his faltering career and his reputation. It was then that he discovered The Longest Day, Cornelius Ryan's riveting account of the D-Day invasion of Normandy during World War II. The book appealed to Zanuck for many reasons. It was an epic true story about a day that changed the course of human history. It also appealed to Darryl's conservative Midwestern patriotism and his own first-hand memories of 2 world wars.
Well, during World War II, of course, Zanuck was not in Hollywood. He was off at war. In terms of his own life, it was obviously important, and it gave him the idea, many years later, to do The Longest Day.
Making The Longest Day quickly became Darryl's only dream. In keeping with the book's journalistic approach, Zanuck wanted to scrap traditional narrative storytelling in favor of a more documentary style. The film would be shot on location in France and photographed in black and white. It would also feature actors from all corners of the globe and would have English, French, and German characters speaking in their native languages with the help of subtitles.
This was supposed to be a balanced look, a realistic look in retrospect, so that you could see, what was happening behind the scenes from all sides versus, now it's the good guys coming in and knocking out the bad guys.
In early 1961, Zanuck went to work on the script with author Cornelius Ryan. He also hired a small battalion of directors, 4 in all, each one representing the point of view of the story's fighting forces. Gerd Oswald and Andrew Martin would handle the scenes involving American GIs. Bernhard Vicky would cover the German perspective. and Englishman Ken Anakin would direct sequences involving British forces.
Darryl made it very clear from the beginning that he wanted to tell exactly as it was, and he was getting experts from the French resistance, from the British, and from a German who had been through it all. And therefore, it was something I felt was rather important.
Preparations for the film, nicknamed Z-Day, were in high gear. But in May of 1961, DFC was summoned to New York for a meeting of the Fox Board of Directors. There, the board informed Zanuck that his picture was about to be shut down. Fox's books were swimming in red ink due to costly overages from the runaway production of Cleopatra in Europe.
Cleopatra was a project that was initiated at Fox after Zanuck had left as production chief in 1956. It started off as a relatively modest enterprise, and it just grew, and the costs were escalating, and Fox was going broke.
But DFC wasn't a man to give up without a fight. Like an opposing general, he outflanked the board and attacked them with his powers of persuasion.
He could compel boards of directors and stockholders because he was a showman, and he would act out all the parts. He was kept unrolling a film in his mind. He was theatrical. He was great.
He mesmerized all the members of the board, some of whom had been, of course, in World War II and had even been at D-Day. And as a result, after this spellbinding oration, this sales job, they said, okay.
The board voted Darryl a budget of $8 million, but warned him that if he went so much as 1 penny over, they would shut the picture down.
Now, $8 million, that's still a sizable sum in 1962. But comparatively speaking to Cleopatra, it was, kind of a B movie.
With grit and determination, Darryl F. Zanuck had fought one of the greatest professional battles of his life. But whether or not Darryl could win the war was a question only time could answer. In June 1961, Darryl Zanuck took command of The Longest Day. He returned to Paris and began assembling an impressive army of international stars in 43 major roles. One of the first to sign on was Roddy McDowall, who was happy to get in a few days of work while waiting through Cleopatra's endless production delays.
Cleopatra went on and on and on and on and on. And at one point, when I hadn't worked for so long, I called Darryl up in Paris and said, please give me anything, anything, I have to work, because I was on Cleopatra for a year.
McDowall was just one of many stars who were eager to come to the aid of the man who had helped launch their careers. Red Buttons was offered his role in the film after bumping into Zanuck at a Parisian cafe.
He said, have you read a book called The Longest Day? I said, as a matter of fact, I just read it coming over, which I did. He said, I'd like you to play the paratrooper who gets stuck on a church steeple in Sam Araglais in Normandy. I almost went into cardiac arrest, because for my money, I thought that was the best cameo in the movie.
Playing one of an ill-fated group of paratroopers who mistakenly land in the middle of a heavily fortified town, Button's character is suspended from a church steeple and watches helplessly as his comrades are slaughtered.
In Washington, D.C., I met the guy who I played, the paratrooper, the actual guy. His name was John Steele. And when the picture was over, he stuck his arm around me and he said, kid, if I'd have lived my life all over again, I'm glad you did it, not me.
Darryl Zanuck scored a major victory when he landed John Wayne for the critical role of Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Vandervoot. Principal photography on The Longest Day began in August 1961, using 31 separate exterior locations throughout Normandy. Every effort was made to shoot scenes on the very same sites where battles had been fought 17 years earlier. With unprecedented military cooperation, authentic World War II planes, tanks, and armaments were gathered from around the globe, and whatever couldn't be found was carefully reconstructed. It was no wonder the New York Times had dubbed Zanuck the Supreme Commander after General Eisenhower.
He was almost like staging D-Day all over again. He had units working all over the place, and he was orchestrating this whole mass maneuver that involved armies, that he was getting from France and from England and from the United States.
For budget and scheduling reasons, Zanuck had all 4 directors working simultaneously at different locations throughout the region. While Gerd Oswald supervised the paratrooper action at Saint-Mary-Glise, Andrew Martin was 200 miles away filming Spitfires strafing a column of German troops. and Ken Anakin was staging an actual train wreck. But there was far more to The Longest Day than spectacular battle sequences. Darryl Zanuck never let the audience forget that the story of D-Day was also a personal human drama.
It really was incredible. The intimacy wasn't lost inside the huge panorama of it. It was an extraordinary achievement.
By early fall, Zanuck and his crew were ready to shoot the film's most ambitious sequence. But what Zanuck's cast and crew didn't know was that the film had already exceeded its tight $8 million budget, and the producer was now financing the film with money from his own pocket. If Zanuck was worried, he kept it to himself. With the film's most ambitious and difficult sequences completed, Zanuck knew that his film had all the elements necessary to ensure box office success. But what DFC didn't count on was the devastating impact Cleopatra threatened to have on his masterpiece. Cleopatra's costs had swollen to more than $40 million, 5 times the budget of The Longest Day. Fox stockholders were in a panic, and the studio was desperate for revenue. Studio management virtually shut the company down and began selling off valuable assets and real estate. They also looked to The Longest Day as a source for quick cash.
I think he realized that the company was in such dire financial straits that they were going to take his picture and dump it out there in order to get cash back into the company to pay off this terrible Cleopatra debt that they had rung up.
Infuriated that the Fox board would scavenge The Longest Day by releasing it as a B movie, Darryl flew to New York for a long overdue showdown.
It was a great conflict. It was like a head-on collision. One film had to go, and it was Cleopatra.
He went to the board, and I sat there in the corner, and it was one of the most amazing performances I've ever seen in my life. But he hit them on an emotional level as the founder of the company, and absolutely attacked them. And after a couple of hours of this tirade, they were totally wiped out, actually, and he took over the company, and it was as simple as that.
On July 25, 1962, by a vote of 8-3, Darryl F. Zanuck was elected president of 20th Century Fox. He had conquered the studio and taken no prisoners, but the final battle was about to be waged at the box office.
In the most unusual tribute ever paid a motion picture, the City of Light illuminates its enchanting Trocadero Gardens to celebrate the world premiere of The Longest Day.
The Longest Day premiered in Paris on September 25, 1962, and the spectacular event became a source of French national pride.
The man responsible for the gala premiere, Darryl F. Zanuck, attends with Irina Demick, who plays the part of the underground heroine in The Longest Day.
I was with him the night of the premiere, and I was sitting right next to him in Paris. He had to eat his pee off singing from the Eiffel Tower. What a night. What a night. What a showman he was.
A rare tribute indeed on this history-making night of nights.
The New York premiere 9 days later was also a night to remember.
The tidal wave of enthusiasm that started in Paris rolls with ever-growing momentum over New York to honor Mr. Zanuck's incredible achievements in The Longest Day. And like the Eiffel Tower, the lights of the Great White Way emblazon the night to hail the immortalizing of the historic events of June 6, 1944.
I remember going to the opening in New York when it was released. It was, absolutely mind-blowing. I had no idea when I went to the opening of that film that it was going to be the way that it was. It was extraordinary.
As a group from the cast of The Longest Day is joined by Red Buttons, another of the 42 international stars of the fascinating film.
Zanuck's enormous publicity paid off. The Longest Day proved to be a box office smash. It received almost universal acclaim and was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, winning for cinematography and special effects. In its first year, The Longest Day grossed more than $25 million, and the huge profits helped breathe new life into 20th Century Fox. And as for Cleopatra, Zanuck took control of the $44 million production and slashed the film's projected 6-hour running time to 3 hours. It was a controversial move, but one that probably saved 20th Century Fox. For the next decade, Darryl Zanuck, together with his son Richard, guided 20th Century Fox through one of its most prolific and successful periods.
There wouldn't be a Fox Film Corporation, I don't think, without DFC. Those films have a great deal of him in them, of his convictions and of his soul.
I was very surprised when I heard that Zanuck had been to London and talked to my agent. I never thought that I was going to be involved in fighting pictures. At that time, it was just to go into France and shoot the British operation at the Arne River, and also then Sword Beach, which was the British landing. It turned out quite differently. I arrived in the Hotel Royal in Caen. The other directors were there, Bernard Vicky for the German part, and Andrew Marton for the American action part. Zanuck sat down with me and he said, "I was very sorry I didn't meet you in London, but this is how you'll be working." And he just roughed out who I would have working for me, who the special effects people were. I mean, that was quite amazing. Before I actually had to start shooting, I went out to see what Marton was doing in the landings on the cliffs at La Roche. This is where the American soldiers were having to come off the boats and climb a cliff. Marton was wonderful in the way he lined up every shot. But Darryl Zanuck seemed to be looking over his shoulder on everything he shot. And that was a little reservation I had, because I liked to hear what a producer wanted, but it was then my show. So I was a little dubious about that. Oddly enough, Zanuck never did look over my shoulder. But as I say, I went to Les Roches. I had the chance to go there about part of 4 days. I met Rod Steiger there, who I'd made a film with. We shook hands and he said, "You know, Ken, this time we won't be doing quite exactly what we want. We have to just fit in," he said, "but I think this is going to be a sufficiently important film," and I think he was quite right. I discovered that Zanuck had 4 secretaries working for 24 hours a day, and their job was to keep in touch with films where exciting American actors were working in, and they would find that so-and-so was going to be clear for perhaps 2 days, 3 days, and you could grab them. He just wanted to get whoever he could in to help the marketing of the film. I don't know of any film that had a cast like that. But this picture doesn't depend on any of the stars. It was Zanuck's picture and Cornelius Ryan's concept. I went out to see the Arne River Bridge to decide how it should be done, and I was very lucky to discover that one of my actors, who I'd already worked with, was Richard Todd, and he had been a British parachutist in that operation. That really helped me a tremendous lot, because whenever I had the slightest doubt, I was able to say what really happened here, and he knew it all. I think we worked for 3 nights for the actual drop, because the drop occurred at night. And then we went on to the day action and how they got across the bridge. The first time I met Lord Lovat, I was set up looking down the bridge and had arranged to pan from right to left to come onto the bridge. He came to me and said, "You know, Anakin, I didn't come that way. I came straight down there." I said, "But it's a better shot if we pan you on." So he said, "Well, I'm just telling you how it was." And Zanuck said, "I think Ken's shot is a better shot. We'll do it that way." That sort of decision had to be made. And it shows the sort of person that Zanuck was, that he was a practical producer as well as having a concept. I also remember that when we were shooting the reverse shot with Lawford leading people across the bridge, Lovett, standing beside the camera, said, I don't know why you don't use me doing that walk. I've never walked like that. That's a sissy's walk. By that time, they saw my rushes and were very pleased with them. Then Zanuck introduced me to his lady friend, Irena Demick.
The man responsible for the gala premiere, Darryl F. Zanuck, attends with Irena Demick, who plays the part of the underground heroine in The Longest Day.
And he said, you know, Ken, you're supposed to come back in November to do the landings at Sword Beach. He says, there's also a whole lot of action with the Free French, and I would like her to plan the action for the blowing up of a train. I said, well, has she done anything before? He says, no, she hasn't. She's not really done any acting before, but I think you'll find that she could be very good. And Bourgogne was the main French cameraman, and he said to me, well, it's been nice working with you, Ken, but I think you'll probably be on the way out now, because anything to do with Zanuck's girlfriend can be very dangerous. Over the 49 movies that I've made, I've come to very dangerous situations with at least 5 producers' girlfriends. In most cases, I've been able to cope with it because I understand the problem. If he'd promised to do something for them, you had to help him to do it. We became very good friends. She did exactly what I wanted. And this was the French resistance movement. And we planned for this blowing up of the train. I was given 2 top special effects people to do the train blow up. I set up 6 cameras. And when we eventually did it, the train blew up and the engine stopped within 2 feet of the camera. It's quite a good sequence, that, I think. This led to Zanuck saying, it still isn't November. I'd like you to pick up a few more shots, which led me into the biggest sequence I'd ever done, the taking of the casino in Ouistreham, where, if you remember, the French resistance come and take a bridge. It was a sequence done by being allocated the most wonderful helicopter pilot. I think 2 of the French directors have had a go at it. Certainly Vicky never had a go at it, the German. And Martin said he wasn't going to do anything in a helicopter. When we saw the rushes, it really worked. Zanuck was almost bouncing up and down, the fact that his concept had at last been achieved on film. So, as you can guess, working with his girlfriend and him, I traveled to all the various locations we did and got to know Zanuck terribly well. And he would discuss scenes he wanted, and I picked up various things that hadn't been done until we came to November, where he had discovered that in La Rochelle, the Americans were doing an exercise with 35 landing craft, purely modern training. But they were the same landing craft that had actually been used in the war, the same type. This is where I had to do this really big sequence of the British landings at Sword Beach. I did close-up stuff on the beaches, and then the big thing was to make the coverage with the landing craft coming in, bringing in Lord Lovat, but actually Peter Lawford.
Any minute now! Stand by!
Zanuck told me how he would like to see that. He said, I've been studying that, and I would like the Queen's Piper, who we have, to be able to come off the ramp of that boat and to walk in waist deep, very proudly playing his pipes, and with Lawford just coming in behind him, leading the 100 British commandos, who we would all clearly see the resolution on their faces as they came in. He had set up 5 cameras all over the beach. We had 2 German Stuka planes which were coming down to bomb the landing. We had explosions fitted up. We had burning tires to give us fire and smoke. Zanuck said, you know, you've got $3 million worth of people and equipment on this. I want to see every bit of it. So I took a ride out on the landing craft which was going to do it, and I said to the top sergeant, what I need to know is how long after I give you the cue for the landing craft to actually be sloping down and onto the sand. We did 10 rehearsals of that, and every time it took 17 seconds for that to happen. Damn me if that bloody ramp didn't drop in 3 seconds. And before I could stop him, Lawford led the way down this ramp and with the piper, and they just vanished. They disappeared. And the 100 commandos disappeared. And then watching from that boat, I saw the piper come up, shake his bagpipes, and march in, followed by a very, very bedraggled Lawford, and gradually all the commandos. As I came ashore, there was Zanuck coming up to me, smoking a cigar. I said, it looked pretty good, didn't it? And he said, can you tell me why they didn't come in waist deep as we had planned? I said, well, they didn't, and maybe that's how it would have been when they really did land. He says, I'm prepared to pay for doing it again just to make sure that they come in waist deep. And so this time, the piper went down, only waist deep, played brilliantly, and everybody went ashore, and everybody was very happy with it. After this, Lawford threatened to take a lawsuit because he said he'd nearly drowned, and what had happened was that because he was going to come in waist deep, they hadn't fastened up the uniform at the front. Therefore, a whole lot of water had come in there, and he might have drowned. So that was pretty serious.
And we all know what it means to be driven into the sea.
The slightly more amusing thing was all the commandos going under. I mean, they were commandos, so it didn't really matter. But every one of them went to the cashier and claimed that they'd put their money under their hats. And they all claimed various amounts. I think that added a few dollars to the sequence. Everybody was now very happy that we got that done, and Zanuck said, well, we're going into the studios in Paris. I'm going to make another request that you may think rather strange. He says, I would love it if you would set up the shots. Say the word to me, and I'll come down and I'll say action and cut. Here again, this was rather strange, and I said to my wife, why should I do that? She says, why not do it? I said, well, I've shot 25 movies, and he wants to pinch my work. She says, yes, but you're working for him, and it won't hurt you at all to do it. So I did it. I worked for 5 weeks in the studio, and I think Zanuck came down twice and said, action and cut. And so he was happy he'd done this, and I was happy because it brought to a finish a very unusual 4-month work. I would say a great amount of kudos should go to Elmo Williams, the man right beside Zanuck every day, saying whether something had been covered well or whether it hadn't. I think Elmo did a fascinating job in pulling it all together as a film. He would take the bits that told the agonies and the amount of effort required behind each piece of D-Day history, rather than picking out the most from the face of a star. We achieved a certain concept that Zanuck had, which was to reproduce the D-Day landings as they truly were, so that you can sit in your seat and feel the hardships and the triumphs that were achieved there in various actions of that 24 hours.
London's celebrated Leicester Square was never before invaded by such crowds as those drawn to the English premiere of The Longest Day.
We eventually came to London. We had the premiere in the Leicester Square Theatre, and it was attended by Zanuck and Elmo, and that was another very nice experience too. Altogether, it was pretty wonderful.
London makes it a day to remember.